Central Time Zone, 8 a.m. your time. Woot woot, up early, ready to go. Thanks everybody for joining us this morning. We're excited for the opportunity to share with you a couple of updates, but then just to have a discussion, answer some of your questions, give you an opportunity to talk with other folks in programs like yours, and just kind of have an open discussion this morning. That's really what we hope to accomplish. We did this last week with our DCBS programs, and so we had a really good turnout for that from all of our group homes, hospitals, mental health day treatments, those kinds of programs last week, and had some really good discussion around educational services, around concerns that they had in their programs, learned from each other, really asked questions of each other and gave feedback. And I hope that's what we will have this morning. So I'm going to invite you all as we go through this to feel free to ask questions, to have conversations with other folks. It's pretty informal, so feel free to jump in at any time if you have questions. I'm going to ask questions as we go through, and I might ask some of you specifically to share what's going on in your programs, just to kind of help us get a dialogue started. And so other folks can hear from you directly. Last week we did that, went very well. We hope it will again today. I'll remind you also that we do have a chat feature down at the bottom of your screen. There is a chat box if you're on full screen, and then you can enter in questions there too if you don't want to answer that or ask those out loud, or if you are on a phone call or something else. So feel free also to enter things into chat, and then we can have those read to everybody as well. Justin just said good morning. Good morning, Justin. Good morning, everybody. Glad you all are here. So before we get into that, though, I do want to give you a couple of updates, just a couple of things that are going on that we've already talked about in some detail, but I wanted to give you some additional information around that. The first and most pressing thing that is going on that impacts our school districts right now from our perspective, other than all of the COVID response, which we'll talk about throughout this meeting, is the budget situation at the state level. I've shared with you all during our KECSAC meeting last month about the governor's request to all of the state agencies to prepare for an 8% across the board budget reduction. So since that time, we've had a lot of developments, and I just want to give you information that we have and make sure that you're aware of the conversations that are going on. Last Tuesday, which not this Tuesday, but the one before this one, the Department of Education presented their budget plan to the legislature in the budget subcommittee review meeting. So I don't know exactly the name of it. I can't recall it right now at the top of my head, but it's where folks come in and talk about their budget and what they're doing. And so they came in and prepared and presented kind of where they are with their budget and with the request from the governor's office to prepare an 8% reduction. So a couple of things that are important in that conversation for us. Number one is that the governor in his request exempted a budget reduction in SEEK funding. So that's the base funding formula for all of our school districts. That is the amount of money that each individual student generates for each district. And so that was immediately exempted from the top and from any discussion moving forward, which is a wonderful thing. What that also tells us, though, is that if the department is looking for an 8% budget reduction, and we already know that SEEK is exempt, that means that everything else is on the table. So one of the other things that the department decided to do through the State Board of Education and department leadership was to also exempt from those reductions the Kentucky School for the Deaf and the Kentucky School for the Blind. So those are the three programs that are exempt in the current budget reallocation, or whatever they're going to call it. One of the interesting things for us is that when we talk about an 8% budget reduction to the Department of Education, you're looking at a budget reduction of about $49 million. That's the estimate that they were provided. However, when they presented their budget plan to the committee last week, they submitted a plan to reduce the budget by only $28.5 million. So even though the governor's office had asked for an 8% at 49%, they came back and said the most that we think we can we can reduce would be 28.5. So significantly less than what the governor's request was. And so we'll see what happens beyond that. We do know that in the discussions that took place during that meeting, that the learning and results services area, which is where our line item in the Department of Education's budget, the KECSAC line item, is located there. We know that that is going to be the area that has the largest budget reduction for the State Department of Ed. So while they did not give specifics within that line item, they did talk about the Family Resource and Youth Services Centers. They talked about the Kentucky Center for Mathematics. They talked about a couple of others. They didn't mention us specifically by name, but we have to assume at this point that everything within that line item will have some sort of budget reduction should we move forward with an overall reduction for the state. In the governor's comments, and many of you have probably heard this or read this, he is projecting at this point that there will be anywhere between a $200 and $500 million budget shortfall in the current budget based on the economic fallout related to COVID-19 and the pandemic. So that's kind of where we are and what they're looking at. And so with that in mind, I want to once again kind of share with you the KECSAC plan of where we will move forward should we actually get a budget reduction in the current year. So we have, as we always do, every year we set aside 2% of our overall allocation into what we call a rainy day fund in case we get a budget reduction during the calendar year. That has happened on several occasions since 2008. We have had that happen multiple years, and you all know that, and we have always been able to absorb those budget reductions without any additional impacts on school districts. Now, you all also know that in the years where we had that money set aside and we did not get a budget reduction, we have always returned that money back out to school districts in the final quarter of the year. So several of the years that in the past, since 2008, you all have received an increase in your per child rate at the end of the year, or you've received many grants that we've done through a competitive process. So if there's no budget reduction, obviously all of those funds are returned. But if there is, then we have those funds set aside so that we can have that without impacting services. This year, however, starting on March 13th, when the governor's first recommendations for stopping in-person instruction in our schools, and when we started talking about reducing restaurant capacities, reducing business interactions, all of those, and we saw the writing on the wall that this was going to have a pretty significant economic impact on the Commonwealth, we took some additional measures at that time, 7 months ago, at the start of this, to really start being ready to respond. So while we normally put aside 2% of our budget, this year we put aside 4.7% of our allocation. So significantly more than we normally set aside in case there would be a budget reduction. That amounts to about $450,000, $460,000 that we have in a reserve fund this year that has not been allocated to any school districts as of yet. However, even that at a 4.7 set aside, if we move to a situation where there is an 8% budget reduction or anything larger than that, the first thing that we would do is obviously take the rainy day funds and return those. So that's has the least amount of impact on districts. The second thing we would do is look at our internal administrative budget for our offices and take at minimum a reduction equal to the percentage that they are requesting from all agencies. So if they said everybody is doing an 8%, we would look internally and do our best to make sure that we meet that 8% as a minimum. If we could do more than that, then we would. Our budget, however, internally is very small compared to the overall allocation that we receive from the state. So that would be step number 2. Step number 3, in our least likely situation, and the situation that we want to avoid as much as we can, would be to reevaluate the per child rate that is distributed to our local school districts. That is our last, that would be the last ditch effort to meet a budget reduction in this year. But I do want you all to be aware that that is an option that is on the table should we get to a situation that is as dire as is currently being described for the budget reduction. So I want to say that first, we're looking at, can we do a 5%? If we go up to maybe a 5% reduction, then I think we can handle that with the amount we have set aside, as well as the amount that we could pull, hopefully, from our internal administrative budget. But beyond that, then we would have to go back to our school districts and revise the per child rate that has already been allocated to your district. So we just want you all to be aware of that as well as we continue to have these conversations. We included in the memorandum of agreement this year for the first time a note that should the General Assembly or the governor require a budget reduction, that we reserve the right to reallocate the funds that have been distributed to the districts already. So we did that because we thought, we were anticipating that this may be the first time that we ever have to do that. We have not had to do that in the 16 years that I've been at KECSAC. I do not want this to be the first year to do that. I don't want it to ever have to do that. But we have to respond and be able to do what we can do. We can't get money from anywhere else. We don't have any additional funds anywhere else. We can't generate any additional funds ourselves. So that would be kind of where we are. So that's kind of the process of what's laying out. I will share that we're hopeful that at some point there will be additional conversations at the federal level about a second round of CARES funding. We do know that the federal government provided Kentucky with some CARES funding early on during the pandemic to kind of offset some of the impacts, including the impacts on unemployment insurance, on other things that are going on. And so we're hopeful that there may be a round two. And if that is the case, then we anticipate that budget reduction would be on the smaller end if we can have some federal funds in there. However, as you all know, and I'm sure you've read, Senator McConnell adjourned the Senate until November 9th without taking up any additional legislation responding to the COVID-19 crisis and the pandemic. So while discussions were on the table and happening at the White House and with the House of Representatives, the Senate has adjourned, and so there won't be anything or any additional discussions until that November 9th date, and we will see what happens then. So we will keep our fingers crossed. We hope that you all will too, that some federal funding flows down from that level to our state to kind of shore up the budgets we have here, so that we don't have what I think it would be a pretty catastrophic budget impact to us and to our districts. So that's kind of where we are. What questions do you all have about anything related to the budget, kind of the governor's calls on that, how we're responding? I'd be happy to entertain any questions you all might have.
Ronnie, explain reallocation.
What that would, you mean to the district level?
Yes.
Okay. So again, that would be our the last line of defense. And so what that would mean is that the per child rate that is your funding is based on would be reassessed at that point. And so it would be reduced. And so let's say right now that the per child rate, and I don't have it in front of me, but if it's $4,000 per child and that's what we allocated to you, if we had to do an additional cut, then however much that is that we could not get from our rainy day fund and we could not pull from our administrative fund, whatever amount that is, let's say it's an additional $200,000. The $200,000 will be deducted from the overall allocation that's provided to school districts and then redivided by the number of students that we had last year. So your $4,000 may go down to $3,900 for the current year. That's essentially what that means. And it would be equally spread over all programs. No one program would be impacted at a percentage rate higher than anyone else. We would do that as equitably as possible within the system that we have. Again, I hope that it does not come to that. We've never had to do that. I'm going to be honest. I hope that this is I hope that the conversation around an 8% reduction, when we're talking about $500 million, I hope that it is I I hope that it's just a political tactic to generate additional federal funding. I hope that's what it is. I hope that we are not in a situation where we really would be at $500 million short. That is a significant amount in a state budget. And I'm not sure how state government and the essential services that state government provides would be able to continue if it was at that level. I'll also say that $200 million to $500 million is a huge range when you're talking about a budget shortfall. So there's, you're looking at a $300 million difference, and that could, if we're on the low end of that, obviously much more manageable than if we're on the high end. If that is the case, we're going to hope for the low end of that and hope that our state tax receipts continue to be somewhat stable. I don't know if you all have been following that as closely as some of us have, but we know that state tax revenue has dipped, but has not dipped significantly. And that has been largely due to the taxes that have been collected on the unemployment insurance that has come through the federal CARES funding. However, that stops, I believe, at the end of October. So up until now, you all know, till the end of July, there was a $600 per week additional unemployment insurance payment to anyone who was on unemployment insurance. And so that was paid for by the federal government. That stopped at the end of July. And then additional funds were provided at that time, which would equal a $400 per week increase in the unemployment insurance, with $300 of that being paid by the federal government and $100 of that being paid by the state. So those unemployment insurance, those kind of things are still taxed as income. And so the income taxes continued to come in. And so revenues were not as low as we anticipated them to be at that time. However, those funds now end, I believe, at the end of October. And so unless that is renewed or extended, then we do anticipate that the end of the fiscal year, the end of this quarter, will be a pretty significant drop in state revenues. And so we're keeping our eyes on that, and that'll certainly impact where we move forward from here. The other part to this, and you all probably know this, is that in the coming legislative session, they are also looking at a budget for the next year. They only did a one-year budget last year. They normally do a two-year budget. But at the end of the legislative session, when this crisis emerged and they still had about 30 days left of their session, they revised their plan and moved from a two-year budget to a one-year budget because they weren't sure exactly what was going to happen with state revenue at that point either. So let's keep our fingers crossed that as they come back together and have those discussions in January and all the way through April, this is going to be a short session. They will only meet for 30 days. Usually during a budget session, they meet 60 days. So they'll have to do a full budget in a shorter time span. And we have had a lot of new emerging needs that have come forward during this crisis, including rural hospitals and the needs of those facilities, child care agencies. All of that has come to the forefront during this. And so we'll see the impacts, not just of this budget reduction request, but also of the next year's budget provided by General Assembly. So that's kind of where we are. I hope that makes sense. I know I talked a long time on that, but I want you all to be aware right at the beginning of where we are and kind of the plans that we're making, and we're preparing for a worst case scenario and hoping for a best case scenario. All right, so that's budget stuff. The other thing that's going on right now, many of you have already had your program improvement site visits. We have shifted how we're doing that, and we have moved primarily to a virtual model. Although we have had some in-person visits, probably not to many of our DJJ programs other than our day treatments may have had some in-person visits, but others have been virtual. And some of our DCBS programs are offering in-person instruction, so we've been there as well. Angie, I don't know if you have anything that you'd like to share about the program improvement process and kind of where we are to give folks an update.
Well, I have done all of my visits virtually, and really it has gone very well. The thing that seems to be the biggest hiccup when doing those visits virtually would be classroom observations. I would, if you're due up soon and are going to have a virtual visit, I would encourage you to reach out to both Peggy and me, and Justin did this after our IAG meeting on Tuesday, is set up a Google Meet and see if we can, or however you're going to offer, and however you are offering instruction, and see if we can join. That was a problem one place I went. I couldn't join the Google Meet, so the school administrator had to join the Google Meet and then Zoom a Zoom meeting with me, and then through the Zoom meeting she shared the Google Meet when she shared her screen. So we've had to be very creative on that, but really, I mean, everything is, we're still doing all the same things. We're interviewing teachers, we're visiting classrooms, we're looking at documentation, interviewing students, teachers, your partner agency. So everything is just the same in just a little different format. If you have any questions, shoot, I'm ready to talk to you about it, and let me know.
Great. Thanks, Angie. Does anybody have any questions about the program improvement process at this point and kind of how we've pivoted that a little bit? All right, good. So those are really the big issues that we wanted to talk to you this morning. Now we want to open the floor and just have a conversation. You guys have an opportunity to talk with other folks about what's going on in their programs, what they're doing, how they're handling some situations that you might be running into. We'd be happy to open the floor for that at this point. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to jump in there. And I'm okay with a little bit of silence, so I'll sit here for a second before I start.
Mr. Nolan, this is
Yes,
Bobby
hey,
Leckie
Bobby.
with Bull County Day Treatment. I just want to let y'all know that I know you tried to reach out to me once, calling me. We moved to KSD campus, and we're on Kentucky School for Deaf campus now. We just got told Wednesday at 3:30 that we're getting kicked off campus now. So we had to go back to virtual school. And we're in the process of trying to find a new location for our school. And that's mainly due because we built a brand new middle school on our main campus. And then our middle school where we were last year is getting renovated for our new Woodlawn Elementary. So they're trying to find a spot to get us there. If not, we'll have to be virtual school for the rest of the year. So I just want to let you know that's what's going on with Bull County Day Treatment right now.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for that. That's an unusual, I don't think anybody else is going to be able to relate to that. I don't know how you guys did that, but I know you worked on being at the School for the Deaf for quite a while over the summer. Is it related to the COVID-19 crisis and kind of shutting down their campus, or?
Well, that's what I really think it is. It's we had a student that had to be tested, and his dad works on campus. So when they found out his dad had to be tested, I guess that kind of scared them a little bit. And then they said that, well, if we can't have students on our campus, then no one can have students on the campus, which I get it. There could be a lawsuit with that because, somebody can pop up and say, well, you're letting hearing students on campus, but you're not letting hearing impaired. So I could see a possibility of a lawsuit there. But Kentucky Department of Education just basically said no one's going to be on campus. So we've been off since Wednesday at 3:45.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. If there's anything we can do to with your district to support the process of looking or whatever we can do, please let us know. We'd be happy to assist in whatever way we can with our limited knowledge of Danville.
How many do you have, Bobby?
I have a maximum of 15, but I got 13 right now. I had 10 in person, 3 virtual. So they have a spot at the brand new middle school. It's called the scene room for when actors change to go into the auditorium.
Yeah.
So they're trying to hustle that up to get finished so we can move into that. But other than that, we're virtual, and that's really put us in a bind because.
Well, with 10 students and 6 feet apart, you have to find a room that's big enough. almost 2 rooms, unless that room is a very big room. Because, I mean, it sounds like 10 kids, you know, they ought to be able to try to find something in the school district to be able to help you out, but it would have to be actually 2 rooms, I guess.
Absolutely. You know, so I'm sure the same as everybody else's experience. If you're not physical school, those virtual school learners, they kind of do their own thing, and so that's the thing we're facing now. We went back to virtual and trying to get them back on task to do the school work and participate.
Yeah. And Bobby, I do think that is something everybody here probably can relate to, the challenges of having students virtually and how to engage students, how to keep them involved in the learning process, and how to make sure that we're having results with students. Can anybody else share with us how they are working with students who are virtually engaged and keeping them on track?
We've had a lot of success with home visits. Before, we've not been able to do a lot of home visits because obviously you have kids in school. We have been scheduled every Friday from July 8th, when we started our extended day calendar. Every Friday we have the staff divide up the kids and we go out, check on them, see if they need anything, see if they're having problems, what can we do to help. So we've been doing a lot of home visits. I mean, all of our kids we have visited numerous times. And that's one of the benefits. They kind of got used to us showing up on Friday. They knew when we were going to come. A lot of times we'd bring them, if they'd been doing work that week and had been online keeping up, we would take them a pop and a Rice Krispie treat, and kids work for stuff. So they kind of got used to us coming by and checking on them. And then if they had needs, food or anything like that, they'd let us know and we could go get those things and bring them back to them. So home visits has been a wonderful success for us. We're trying to figure out when we go back to hybrid, we're going to have Wednesdays off. We're have kids Monday and Tuesday and then Thursday and Friday. So we're going to dedicate Wednesday to going out and doing home visits for our kids that are all virtual platforms that have decided not to come back in. So that's been a benefit, is the home visits that we've been able to do.
Perfect. Thanks, Ellen. And obviously, those of you who are in DJJ residential programs, that's not really maybe an option for you, but there's several folks with the day treatment programs who are on here who are able to respond in that way. So great work, Ellen. Thank you for sharing that. Other folks, what are some challenges that you all are having that maybe you can learn from each other? Anybody have any challenges right now with their instruction, classrooms, management, any of those kind of issues that other folks might be able to help you guys with? Okay. Well, I have a question that I'm interested in, and hopefully several of you will feel free to jump in and share with us. I'm very interested in special education services. Obviously, this is an issue that we've been talking about in our programs for several years now and having a real focus on. We've worked with quite a number of Department of Education folks to make sure that we are providing the level of service that is needed for our students. During this crisis and during kind of this new way of teaching and learning, what are some of the ways that you all are addressing special education needs and making sure that students' IEPs are being followed, those kinds of things? I'm very interested in that. Anybody want to share that? And if not, I'm going to start calling on folks. So feel free to jump in and tell us a little bit about what you're doing. Not everybody at once.
I'll go. We are currently blessed. We don't have any kids with IEPs right now, but this summer we did, doing basically packets across the way. And the special ed teacher I had there in the summertime, she worked really hard on looking at their IEP, looking at their needs, and developing some worksheets and rubric type things for the kids to do that we would send over to have them do, or whether it be a youth worker fill out, like a behavior chart or whatever on how they're doing. And I would pick that back up and scan it back to her for her to review and update, progress monitoring and things like that during the summertime. But that only went on a couple of weeks before the ones that we had were sent to other places or released. So we're currently don't have anybody right now, but it's only a matter of time. We'll get another one back in and be figuring it out as we go.
Thanks, Justin. Jim Daniels, I saw you unmute,
Yeah.
so you're on.
Yeah, one of the things that we're trying to do is make sure that, in particularly, all the teachers are communicating with those kids. Of course, we switched to Edgenuity this year, which was a pretty big learning curve for us, but we're trying to make sure that those kids are staying connected academically. In fact, we're emailing those kids every day here at the facility. Of course, we're not allowed on the facility, or I am, but the teachers aren't. And so we're trying to make sure we're doing that. We're being real deliberate with our paperwork and making sure all that stuff's up to date, because we've gotten a couple of kids in who had, paperwork that had lapsed as a result of this. So we've been trying to make sure that's been done. But, academically, I think it's one of those things that you have to really make sure you're meeting the needs of that student. And you just really have to stay on it. You can't go 2 or 3 days with those kids and not make a connection. So, we're making sure at least every day that we're connecting with those kids and seeing if they need anything, and sort of monitoring them a little more than we probably would if we were here, because if you're here, it's just a little different. But we're making every effort to make sure that those, what's on their IEP is being done. And it's just one of those things you really have to stay on top of. That's what we're doing. We have brought a math teacher, on the facility in an area far enough away that, it meets sort of the guidelines, and help 1 or 2 kids on some algebra stuff, ratio stuff for the last couple of weeks. But other than that, it's just, navigating what you can and can't do right now. So that's what we've sort of done. And of course, we've kept the incentive program going even though we're not here. So that's helped us, academically all the way around too. So that's sort of where we're at.
Great. Thanks, Jim. Anthony, I think that you were up next.
It's been interesting. We were all virtual this past summer, and we were having Google Meets every hour, and our SPED teacher was working with the kids who were having difficulties, especially in the math area, and giving them supplemental work. And then on August 24th, we transitioned to a hybrid schedule. So we're still doing progress monitoring. I still meet with the students who are not in person 9 o'clock each morning, and discuss any issues and things that are going on. And then we have the other set of students here. So we do a Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday, and then everyone's off on Friday. And then we have 2 meets on Friday with the students and answer any questions. So our SPED teacher has done a great job of getting all the information to all of the staff and making sure everyone's aware of the needs of our students. Our biggest concern with our SPED students has been, and all of our students, has been the math area. So we've been doing a lot of supplemental activities to go along with the Edgenuity, because they've really struggled with that transition from Edgenuity, from Apex to Edgenuity.
Perfect. Thanks, Anthony. Does anyone have any IEP requirements or anything on a student's IEP that is particularly challenging right now in this environment? Have you run into anything that has been difficult for you to be able to meet? And if you can share what that is and kind of how you've been able to meet the needs of that student? Last week during our DCBS meeting,
I have gotten a couple of calls from our teachers in our facilities that are struggling with IEPs, and I got with education, and they have directed us to even do it by phone if we have to. And they're also suggested that there was to put together a packet if you wanted to see if they, if they had to be retested in anything, if it had expired and thought that they need to reevaluate it from the beginning. There's some packet that could be used to try to reevaluate them, the kids.
Thanks, Sally.
In our district, when kids, of course, we have some that are virtual that aren't participating, even if we call or whatever, but our special ed department made a spreadsheet that all the teachers in our district are doing. And so they have to go in there and put what was the services they were supposed to provide, and they're putting a student response. And then if they did not get their services for some reason, the teachers are documenting why. If it's, we have a kid, here's an example, he called and said his phone wasn't working, so he couldn't join the Google Classroom. But he called. But anyway, so then we can document and we can show these are the services they were supposed to get. This is why they didn't get them today. And this is what we tried to do in order to meet their needs.
Good advice, Tammy. I think that's exactly on. That we have to keep good records. We have to show and demonstrate that we're making a good faith effort to provide the services. That documentation, I think, is critically important, especially as we work our way through this. And this is not something that is just for our programs. All the traditional A1 schools are dealing with the same kinds of issues of students who have gone missing, students who are not participating at the level that they typically should. Here in Franklin County, we were at Frankfort Independent. On site-based decision-making, we know that they have lost contact with, at the beginning of the school year, nearly 50 students in the district who picked up Chromebooks at the beginning of the school year, by the way, and enrolled, but have not opened that Chromebook since. And so it's about how are we documenting the efforts to make sure that those students are engaged. What does truancy look like in this situation? All of those kinds of questions that are going on right now. So it's not something that's just we're dealing with in our programs at our day treatments, but it's certainly something happening at every school and every district across the state. So that documentation, I think, is critically important as well. So thank you for all of your all's work on that. Any other thoughts around special education? Anybody else doing anything innovative?
Mr. Nolan, I know, the COVID has been, tragic for everybody trying to figure out they're going to navigate through special education stuff. One way we've used it to our advantage is that at our high school, they designated, teachers to ad minimum. That's what we're using this year is ad minimum. So they work nothing but with ad minimum self-paced students. So what I've done is got with that teacher, and now we have access to an English teacher at the high school. And we set up appointments with her, and she will Zoom in and meet with the student to help them with the English because I'll be honest with you, you can probably tell my communication skills here are lacking in the grammar and English department. So we've used that to our advantage to be able to get to the actual high school teachers and Zoom in on them when they're, planning periods, or like I said, there's 2 or 3 teachers at the high school that is set up just for self-paced students or virtual students. So like I said, we're just taking that to our advantage on that part. That's helped out.
Great. Thanks, Bobby. So we had a question that came through is, I know Anthony is providing some in-person instruction on his kind of blended model. Are anyone else here offering in-person instruction currently?
We do. And
We do.
when we were all
Get out
virtual,
the red.
when we were all virtual from August until October 12th, we offered in-person tutoring every day. And from 8 to 3, the kids could drop in. And we actually had one student that did not miss one day. He came for at least 3 hours every day to get help and get his academics completed.
Good. So I heard Ellen, Tammy, Anthony all have some sort of in-person.
We
Lori?
were scheduled to go back to, Clark County was scheduled to go back to hybrid tomorrow. Today we are in the red as of last night. So We have postponed hybrid until next Wednesday, but from our opening day, September the 8th, until today, we have had kids in the building every day, and even kids, because of my good transportation that I was able to get in touch with. Kids can call the school, and we have a vehicle that we can go pick them up, because a lot of them have parents that work and they're not able to transport them, and we had some bus issues. So we're able to go get them and bring them to the school, and they stay, especially our special ed kids, and they stay and work with the teacher for tutoring and intervention teachers to get work done. And we did that starting September the 8th until yesterday, when our superintendent kind of shut us down.
Okay, good. Thanks for the effort. We appreciate it. Lori, I think you were jumping in there.
I was. So here at Corbin, we are doing targeted in person. We do a group from 8 to 10 every day and from 12 to 2. So we kind of divided our kids out and bring them in on Monday, Tuesday, off Wednesdays, and Thursday, Friday. So we have all but I think 6 that are in person here. Great.
Thank you. I know, Lucinda, I think some of the residential facilities, currently, I think the guidance from the Department of Juvenile Justice is that they only allow the administrator to be in the building, and other teachers are remote. So we know that Lucinda in her building is offering in-person instruction in her classes, and then also has remote instruction from the other teachers in that facility as well. I'm guessing that the other residential programs have a similar setup to that.
Yeah, that's correct. We can't be with the boys any length of time. I mean, we can't actually be, in a classroom, even though they've got, our guys are going to the classrooms, but because that's where, our computers are at, but the teachers can't go there. So that's where we're at.
Okay. Thanks, Jim.
Yeah, we're the same. My guys, we do a combined Google Meet. We're short-staffed right now, so they're all in one room. We don't have the flexibility to divide them in their normal 2 classrooms plus vocational. So vocational is meeting almost every day now. So they started their virtual copper wiring fiber optics class yesterday across the state. So that went well from what I hear. But other than that, I'm not pulling anybody. Rarely am I getting to work with anybody doing what I typically would do, just because I'm busy doing the other things that will fall to whoever's here on that given day. I've joked about copy repair and all this and that, but that's just the reality of it. We got to do what we got to do to make the school run, and I don't mind it. It's what I signed up for, so it'll be all right. So,
thanks, Justin.
We serve the Burnside group home, and so each day one of the teachers is going down and spending about 2 hours with the students, even though they have their Chromebooks and they can get in the Google Classroom all day and ask for help. They do have in person with the teacher about 2 hours a day.
Great. So my next question, I'm just, by the way, April Stanley from KDE over in the comments did a link to a interesting model that she read, an article about it yesterday she saw. So check that out in the comments over there in the chat section. But I'm interested in, at this point, there's been lots of discussion going on around the state about this transition to virtual learning, the impacts of COVID-19 and the long-term impacts on educational outcomes for students. So I think one of the things that we're very interested in is, how do we know if students are learning? How do we know that this is being an effective model for them? So how are you guys tracking that? How do you know what you're doing is working for students, or is it not?
I don't think that you can look at it, for us, it wasn't much of a transition. It was more of a transition in math, because, math, you just have to have examples, and it was tougher for us when we went home. But, I think the further away you were from sort of an online program anyway, the harder it's been for most people. But, I don't know. It's we've continued to have kids working, at a pretty good pace. We graduated, I think we've got 14 kids on campus, and we graduated 2 kids this last week. So Of course, they've been here a significant amount of time, but, they're still, probably about the same rate as before. In our case, they're working at about the same rate, not a whole lot of difference. But of course, we've got the incentive program, which sort of helped us too, because, that sort of drives what our kids do. But, in March, when we had to go home, there was a period of time where, golly, we couldn't get as much out of our kids. And then, as we worked on it more to try to get more work out of them, they sort of came back. But I think it just depends on where your program's at and what you were doing before as to how difficult it's been. And it's just new challenges. It's the last thing that I said before I left in March was we were going to lose control of the camp, and we didn't. But everything that we've done before has changed dramatically. I mean, the camp superintendent's told me a couple times, I don't want to see you on campus, and what do you do with that? I mean, you go home and try to do the best you can.
Other folks, how are you all measuring success for students? How do we know what you're doing right now is working?
In talking to my two teachers, they actually think it's going really well. As far as we made the switch from Edmentum to Edgenuity as a district this year. They've been really pleased with it. They've noticed that the number of retakes have gone down. The kids seem to get it faster by how Edgenuity lays it out and taking advantage of what is inside the program. I'd say the biggest issue that I think is a hindrance right now is, since we're all in one room, there's less questions being asked by the kids. And I don't know if that's just because everybody's in there and listening, or the fact that the teachers aren't really in there. That's our biggest, I don't want to say it's a struggle, it's just a concern that we have, that I think that if we felt like if we could either split them back apart or have, the teacher actually there, they might get a little bit more kind of back and forth, so to speak, in regards to student-teacher dynamic. But for the most part, we're doing well. Like I said, the programming hasn't ever been an issue for us as far as we're used to digital curriculum and things like that. So that wasn't a big leap for us. It's just that the staff has noticed that there's not as much back and forth between student and teacher. And it's probably just because it's the talking through the television, basically. It's a little awkward, and some kids are, we have means that the kids can raise their hand digitally without ever noticing. And we talk to those kids, because some kids are embarrassed to ask questions. And we let them know, it's like, listen, through the monitor software, you can raise your hand, and the kid next to you never has to know that you have a question. You can communicate through the message system should you need it. A few kids have used that over the years, but I think just the teacher not being in the classroom, I think that factors into a part of it.
Great. Thanks, Justin.
Yes, we were able to be at what I feel like an advantage when we went to the hybrid schedule. We reduced our numbers to total capacity of 20, which meant no more than 10 kids per day, so we can do the social distancing. And that put up to 5 kids in each classroom, which that gave our teachers more opportunities to really do more one-on-one and more assistance. And then as we've continued, we had a couple of kids who were basically doing great in person, but wouldn't do anything when they were at their home days. So I talked to the judge and talked to the family, and we had a meeting, and we have 2 or 3 kids, 3 now, who are coming Monday through Thursday. And 2 of those kids have jumped academically tremendously by doing that. So we play with our numbers and make sure our numbers don't exceed 10, and we move things around. But it's been a change in our process and our thinking, and as far as how we're going to serve the kids and who does well on this. And then we have a couple of kids who are completely virtual, and they have seemed to do very well with that. So we have a mixture of a little bit of everything going on.
Great, thanks. All right, we have just a few minutes left here. If anybody has any additional questions or anything that you all want to talk about that we haven't talked about, feel free to jump in. And if there's something that's a burning question or you're wondering how other folks are doing certain things, feel free to jump in there.
Let me ask you one more thing, Ronnie. Is the ADA model that we're operating on this year, is there any talk about that for next school year? Because, you know, in our program, things have changed as far as numbers. We're just trying to figure out where we're going to be and staff-wise, you know, after this year.
Sure. So that actually, you know, as we're talking about the numbers here and looking at different things, one of the things that we did share with you all at our KECSAC meeting, and that I'll just share again, is that we did institute a policy this year that while we are continuing to collect the ADM on our regular schedule, so the ADM reports are due on October 15th, or taken on October 15th, December 1st, and March 15th, we are allowing our districts to either use this year's numbers or last year's numbers, whichever would be higher for future funding for this coming school year. So the 21-22 school year will be based either on this year's numbers or the 19-20 numbers, depending on whichever was higher. We have not gotten to a point of what will happen after that year. I think we're still looking to see what the long-term impacts of this crisis is on our programs. We know that when we look at particularly DJJ programs and residential programs across the state, that the numbers of students in those facilities are much lower than they were 2 years ago. And so this year we're doing this pilot of allowing those numbers to count from last year, because we're trying to figure out, is this a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, or is this a result of a new norm that is happening in our facilities? So just, I think 2 weeks ago, I met with the Juvenile Justice Oversight Council, which is the state level council that looks at juvenile justice issues. And there was a presentation by several folks who are from nationally looking at the impacts of Senate Bill 200, which we are all familiar with. All of you know Senate Bill 200 that happened in 2014. And the goals of that program and of that particular legislation was to reduce the number of students who were in DJJ residential and out-of-home placements. And so they have looked at the data over the years and have seen that we've had a significant decrease even pre-COVID. So they looked at pre-COVID numbers. And when we looked at between 2014 and 2018, I think there was around about a 33% reduction in the number of students who were in out-of-home placement in DJJ. They looked particularly at the number of referrals to a deferral process, to some sort of at-home program for students who may have traditionally been placed in out-of-home care. So they're looking at long-term ranges and long-term studies. And so for us, I think that's part of what we're trying to figure out through this year is, are the numbers this low and going to stay this low because of COVID-19? Or are they this low because of systemic changes that have happened in the state structure? And if they're because of systemic changes that have happened in the state structure, and that this is our new normal, and that our new normal is that we have fewer than 10 students in every program, and that's just the way it is from here on out, then I think we have to start thinking about, what does that mean for us funding-wise, and what does that mean for our entire system? So I'll just say that for this year, we're looking at this model, and we've put into place the policy to allow districts to do that, and then we'll continue to evaluate as we move into next year. And so I don't have an answer for next year yet. I think it's still under review. Angie Austin has a question over there. Has there been any discussion at DJJ over when teachers may be able to return to campus to provide in-person instruction? See, we have several folks from DJJ on here, Shannon Jett, Sally Bolton, Chena Carruthers. I'm not sure if you all have that information or are at liberty to share that, but if you do, we'd love to hear it.
I unmuted myself. I think I can talk on behalf of all of us that we are not part of those conversations. So I think the people in the programs may hear that information before the education branch staff has any idea what's going on there. So we don't know. we wish we knew, but we don't.
Thanks, Shannon. Lucinda had a comment over there in the chat section that they had met with Commissioner Harris, and she indicated they were working on a plan, but no timeline was given for that. It would have to be approved by the Justice Cabinet, obviously, in the governor's office to have those back in. I will say that we had heard that there would be new guidance around the beginning of October when those discussions were happening, but we have not seen that guidance as of yet. So I think we're still working on that. You know, we provided guidance out to DCBS programs, and I know that's not you guys, but we worked with the Kentucky Department of Education and Public Health to develop guidelines specific for residential programs where students live together, so that we could provide in-person instruction in those facilities. What we said to them and what we talked about with them is that these are kids who live together all day. They eat together, they sleep together. They are essentially as though they are in a home together. And so in those situations where a family lives together, there are some allowances with the COVID-19 that we could take. And so in our conversations with them related to those particular residential facilities, we were able to give some guidance to our districts so that they could have in-person, and many of them have resumed in-person instruction because they're small in size like you are. They're residential like you are. They have a lot of things and similarities to our DJJ residential. And so we've also provided that guidance to Commissioner Harris and others at the Department of Juvenile Justice so that they can help formulate some of their decision-making around that too. So fingers crossed that we'll get to that point. I think it's fair to say that they are pretty concerned that they would have an outbreak in their facilities and what that would mean. So I think that they are taking an abundance of caution maybe in those situations. So fingers crossed that that'll happen soon. We have some good snarky comments in the chat, so I'll let you guys read those. All right, anything else? We have 2 minutes left if anybody has anything else they want to share or have conversation about.
We were looking at our reward system, our PBI system, and a lot of our rewards were heavily weighted on Friday, week-to-week rewards, which we aren't able to do at this time. Has anyone else had to adjust their reward system, or what are you all doing?
I think Jim talked earlier. They still have their reward system in place, the one that they had before. Still using that throughout. Jim, I don't know if you want to add additional comments to that.
Well, of course, we've had to do some other things because the school had sort of supported those rewards along with the camp. It's always been a behavior and academic thing for us. We've been able to. I can't tell you everything that they've done, but because we're not supposed to be doing it probably, but I'll just be quiet and say we've done everything we could to make our incentives so meaningful that the kids would do their work and follow their behaviors. So we're, and that, of course, with our case, that's just one of those things you just really have to be creative. I mean, you may have to figure out how to get McDonald's, we're DJJ camp, you can get McDonald's into the camp, it's like gold. I mean, whatever we can do to make them fat and make them learn, we're good with. I know that's not
Are you in my house? What are you?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, we just had a pizza party for our excellent group last week. So we had a pizza party this week for the work they've done over the last 3 weeks. It's just been different. In camp, they're still there every day. So it's a little different with this hybrid virtual schedule. During the summer on virtual, we were able to deliver pizzas at the end of each section, and that helped a lot. But just changing to this virtual has been a little bit different.
And one of the things we've done, of course, like again, we've got them here, so they're not going anywhere. You know, we've every kid there gets a set of headphones because there's videos on the thing, and then of course we have music for kids who've done their work that they can listen to. But we've even bought some pretty cool earphones. I mean, stuff that were, you know, not just your knockoff stuff, which is, it means something to kids to get something a little nicer, and we tried to do that. And we went out and got $60 worth of pork chops or tenderloin and grilled tenderloin. I mean, you know, things like that. I mean, whatever we can do to make the head teacher fatter, that's the question. And, you know, that's what we do. And we try to, you know, whatever it takes. I mean, that's just where you have to go sometimes.
Yeah, I'm not comparing my extended program to yours then. I can't compete with that.
And we got guys wanting to stay on. I mean, you know, I don't know. I'm thinking about putting out a brochure and see if we can get, money to people to come here. I don't know.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We're a little bit over. I appreciate you all being here so much and having this opportunity to talk with you this morning. We'll have another one of these coming up in a couple of weeks. We'll send out an invite for you guys. We hope that you'll join us again. We'll continue to have dialogue and just give you an opportunity really to ask questions of other folks and to learn from them and to figure out how we're all going to navigate this whole new crazy world that we're in and to make the best of it. So thank you for being here, and we will see you all soon. Our office is always available, although we're not physically there right now. You can email us at any time, and we'll be as responsive as we can. But thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.